What's up, you guys? Let's walk the line on this UFC Saudi Arabia card, which, note, it's not taking place this upcoming weekend. If you're catching this nice and early, if you're catching this late, yeah, then maybe it is taking place this upcoming weekend. But the point I'm making, it's not taking place on the 25th. It's taking place on the 1st, and it's an early start time. Since the fights are taking place in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, we have a start time for the main card of 12 p.m. Eastern. Prelims will be on nice and early, little change of pace for us. And I know some of you fight fans that are watching the fights from other parts of the world that may benefit you guys pretty nice there. I have no issue with the start time. I'll be getting the eggs going, and I have the fights going over there on the side of me, and there's nothing wrong with that, guys. So it'll be a beautiful morning. You know the UFC is always delivering to their friends over in the Middle East, as this card is a stacked card in terms of an event that's not a pay-per-view event, right? When you take a look at this card, I mean, you look at the three-headed monster at the top, of course, headlined by the former middleweight champion Israel Adesanya, who's taken on Nassourdine Imavov. That fight has major implications for the future of the middleweight division, which is one of the most stacked divisions in the fight game right now. All right. Remember, years ago, I was always hating on the middleweight division. That's not the case these days. Now, Khamzat Chimaev should be next for the winner of Sean Strickland and DDP. He should be, but we know that he's a fighter that doesn't stay the most active, and sometimes there's some wild things going on with him. So we'll see how his health is and if he's ready for that opportunity. But he should be. I mean, after that performance he had against Robert Whittaker. Besides him, I would not be shocked if the winner of this fight would be next in line. Okay, now there's some arguments for a couple other fighters, but when you take into consideration the star power that Israel Adesanya has, if he wins this fight, even though he's been losing a lot of fights as of recently, they were big fights, and I could easily see the UFC wanting to match him up with DDP once again, which that first fight was phenomenal. He ended up getting subbed late, but up into that submission loss, I mean, the fight was just spectacular, filled with action. I would not be shocked if the UFC wanted to throw Israel Adesanya in there with Sean Strickland after the awkward way the first fight played out. I think that just with the two names going against each other, that's a fight that would have some buzz behind it. Imavov, if he wins this fight, he would be essentially on a 5-fight winning streak, and he's been winning almost every time he's in there. Unfortunately, he did come up short against Sean Strickland that one time. But besides that, he's been on fire. But let me just highlight some other fighters in this division real quick. Caio Borralho is on a massive winning streak. You think about Anthony Hernandez, who's on a 6-fight winning streak, and he's set to take on Brendan Allen February 22nd. If he gets past Brendan Allen, I mean, he has to be right up in the mix. And then on the same subject, in the co-main event, we got Nurmagomedov taking on MVP. MVP is coming up in weight. Maybe his middleweight debut. I know he had a lot of catchweight bouts back in the day in Bellator, right? But he's a welterweight fighter, and he's 1-1 in the UFC now in the welterweight division. Had a very closely contested match against Ian Gary. He came up a little short there, all right? But he's been looking phenomenal, and he's only a couple wins away in either division from getting a huge opportunity with the way he fights and being up there in age, and the UFC's paying him good. And Nurmagomedov is such a fun fighter to watch. He's coming into this fight off one of the craziest knockouts that we've ever seen. And then the only other fighters I just want to note real quick, we got to give a special shout out to my boy, Reinier de Ridder, okay, RDR, who came through for me, handled my lightweight. Hopefully you guys saw the video I put out on IG, put a little funny video out there. We cashed some money, fading my arch nemesis, Kevin Holland. Shout out to my boy, Joe Pyfer, who will be taking on Kelvin Gastelum as well. Joe Pyfer and Sean Brady, a little sneak peek, maybe we'll see the teller doing some work with those two fighters down the line, as they seem to like talking about the stuff that we talk here as well. And then in the co-main event, we got two juggernauts squaring off in Sergey Pavlovich and Jairzinho Rozenstruik, two fighters that have dynamite in their hands. That's going to be a crazy fight. I mean, the top 3 fights are just very stacked. Now, listen, real quick, guys, I have an announcement I needed to make. I have changed my Instagram back to my original IG name, which I was trying so hard to get. I won't bore you guys with all the details, but a long time ago, I had an IG account that was taken down, unfortunately, because I didn't realize you couldn't post UFC fights on the IG like that. At least back in the day, they were a little bit more stringent about it. I got a copyright claim put against me from old Zuffa. I had the whole email and all that. They took my IG down when I had about 11,000 followers way back in the day. It brutally hurt me back then, but they did take away the username MMA Fortune Teller for a long time, and I had to use that MMA Fortune Teller _, which I could not stand to look at that little underscore at the end. And I finally got that gone, got my old name back. We got the blue check. We're verified on IG now. MMA Fortune Teller. Go follow me over there. We're on Twitter at the MMA Teller. Please, guys, go check me out. If anybody wants to work with me for my official plays for this card, go shoot me a DM on social media over there, or you can email me as well. I got my email scrolling below. And I want to give a shout out to my partners at BetUS. If anyone's looking to sign up to a new sports book, reach out to me. I'll give you my referral link. You'll get a 150% match on your first 3 deposits, and I will give you an added present with that as well. All right, guys. It's about that time. Let's go jump into the first fight.
The Teller.
Kicking the card off, we head over to the lightweight division where we have Al-Selwady, the Fortis MMA product, taking on the Zulu warrior Bolaji Oki. Oki takes this fight on short notice, stepping in for Jordan Levitt. That's a very important factor because Oki is a completely different type of fighter than Levitt is a grappling first type of fighter. You know, he likes to twerk his thing in the cage, similar to Aileen Perez. Bolaji Oki is a fighter that's shown some development with his wrestling skills, but without a doubt, he is a knockout artist. He carries big power, and that could be a bit of an issue here for Al-Selwady, as Selwady has been knocked out in all 4 of his losses. Okay, that's an issue. Oki has had 5 KOs out of his 9 victories, but even though he doesn't have an overwhelming amount of fights, I mean, when you watch him, you see he is a raw athlete that carries some big power. Now, Oki is still learning on the job, that's for sure. We saw that showcased in his last fight against Chris Duncan. You have to take note that Oki jumped into the octagon with just 9 professional fights under his belt. So you're going to see these types of learning experiences for him, unfortunately. And that last fight against Chris Duncan, he chose to make a horrid decision to try to showcase his wrestling development, which there was some signs of it looking pretty good, actually. And some of those scrambles, you saw that he's developing there. But why try to showcase that against a fighter in Chris Duncan, who's a little bit more well-rounded, but who struggles extensively on the feet? Duncan's a fighter that's very bad defensively. He's prone to being knocked out and dropped. And that played right into what Oki did best. And Oki was already lighting him up with his hands. Why not keep the fight there when he was able to keep the fight there? He had the choice. He was dictating the pace of that fight. Yeah, he could have easily knocked out Duncan, could have got a nice little fight bonus, and instead he gets choked out with the guillotine, one of the more elementary chokes in the game, which you guys know. I know a lot about my guillotine, the old Teller team there. But that's a submission you shouldn't be getting caught in, so you have to be a little bit cautious backing a fighter like Oki. But I will say this, he is a fighter that carries some serious power, and that could be a major issue for Al-Selwady. In his last fight, he was brutally knocked out against Loik Rachibov. Okay, so he's coming into this fight off a brutal KO. How is that noggin feeling going into this fight? Now let's go take a look at the betting line, as this is a newer fight that was put on the card. Some sports books don't have lines up for the fight, but what we're prematurely seeing is this fight is very close. Okay, it's essentially at pick'em odds. All right, you pick your poison here. We're seeing a minuscule lean towards Al-Selwady's way, but again, this is a pick'em fight. I feel more comfortable being with the danger striker matched up against a fighter who shows clear chin issues and clear defensive issues. Okay, both these fighters throw their strikes from very wide, east and west, but I would say Oki has shown more development, sharpening up those punches, and he just carries a lot more power, and he shows to be more durable as well. Still never been knocked out, right? If we see him lose this fight, it's probably going to be the grappling that cost him, but the wrestling was looking pretty good against Duncan before he made that error of sticking his head in there and getting choked out. So give me Bolaji Oki to get a second round KO. We have the return of Hamdy Abdelwahab, who comes off already his second drug suspension. He's taken on Jamal Pogues. Now, it's worth noting his last suspension, they were able to get to the bottom of why he failed. I guess they found the product that he was using and tested positive for those substances, that it was kind of sprinkled in there. But he's had an issue before. Take that for what you will. This is a career mixed martial artist. Okay, this is an Olympic Greco-Roman wrestler. Okay, he's been very heavily involved in wrestling from a young age. He has all types of accolades, even dating back to when he was a kid. Okay, so he has that background to lean on. And I'll tell you this much: even though you see him with just 3 or 4 professional fights, he had a bunch of bare knuckle MMA fights fighting under the Gamebred banner, and he also has a good amount of amateur bouts. Okay, so this isn't a very, very green fighter, or he's not as green as his resume looks. Of course, most importantly, noting that wrestling background. Okay, this is a fighter. This is a man that is comfortable in combat, and it completely showed in his UFC debut when he took on Don'Tale Mayes, which was a very exciting fight. Played out very closely, but I thought that that was quite impressive for the fact that he came into his UFC debut. And I know some of you guys may not have Don'Tale Mayes rated that highly, okay, but Don'Tale Mayes is a big dude. Okay, he had the UFC background, he had the MMA experience and all that, and I thought that that was a fight that he just looked very good in. Okay, he showed that he's a fighter at that. Okay, we talked about the wrestling background, but he's a real fighter. Okay, he welcomes brawling it out on the feet, and his striking's not that bad for a fighter that you think of it with just a Greco-Roman Olympic type of background. I mean, he'll scrap it out with you, man. He's the type of fighter that will point towards the canvas and trade with you. Okay, and I expect him to be the aggressor in this fight. I think we know how this fight's going to play out. Jamal Pogues is going to do or try to do what he does best, which is stuffing takedowns and using his striking from the outside, which is decently technical. He uses his size and kind of quickness in his hands to outpoint you. That's what he does when he's having success. We saw it in his last fight against Thomas Petersen. He was able to keep that fight standing against a pretty decorated JUCO wrestler there, who we'll be talking about in a little bit. But I think that I chalked that fight a little bit more up to the fact that Petersen was green in there and he didn't have that killer instinct. It's not going to be the case with Hamdy. Hamdy is going to be pressing. And I also feel that Hamdy, even if he doesn't solidify takedowns, he can push Jamal up against the cage and land shots there where he can kind of sneak off rounds if it goes to the judges' scorecards. Okay, so I don't think that Hamdy is just going to welcome this fight to be one of those types of fights that Jamal wants it to be, where he's just striking from the outside, doing that point type of style. Hamdy's going to be looking for takedowns. He's going to be changing levels. He's going to be feinting, coming up, and making this a brawl. And that is the reason why I'm leaning towards his way, especially for the fact that he should have the crowd behind him as he represents Egypt. I think that I know the crowd will be behind him. That could be a little bit of an influence as it goes to the judges' scorecards. And with his more exciting and damaging, if you will, the more aggressive type of style, it could favor him when this fight goes to the judges' scorecards. To play devil's advocate, though, Pogues is just 29 years old, and he's looking better and better with his little style that he likes to implement. And he has the style potentially to stifle Hamdy if he could stuff those takedowns and if he could use his footwork to outpoint him there. But I will take Hamdy Abdelwahab to win this fight. He's also not that old, 32 years old. He's coming off a little bit of a layoff, but I expect him to pick right back up where he left off. And he is the underdog here. Now check this out. On BetUS, he opened up as a -155. He's now a +105. Okay, he's the dog, which maybe you're going to see a pattern here with me targeting some dogs. I got some dogs coming your guys' way. This is another dog here. A lot of action coming in on Pogues. I understand why that action's coming in, just to kind of narrate that to you. The action's coming in because people think that Pogues is going to stuff the takedowns and outpoint him. They like the activity that he's been putting in over the years, and they think that he can get the job done here. I'm going to say Hamdy makes it ugly and wins a split decision or just a very close decision at that. Even if it's a unanimous 29-28, it's going to be a close fight. But I also like having that wrestling in his back pocket. And I do actually believe that he will secure at least a takedown or two in this fight, which will be paramount. And Pogues with a 77% takedown defensive rate. We talked about him being tested against Petersen. But besides that, he doesn't have a lot of high-level competition on his resume. There he is, my dog, Bogdan Grad. He's taking on Lucas Alexander. What an opportunity this is for my boy Grad here. Now, if you didn't know or you forgot, I kind of befriended Bogdan Grad after I had a huge official play lined up on him at dog odds on that Dana White's Contender Series episode. And the content that I was putting out, as I did a live stream also for that episode, but some of the content that I was doing came his way. And he shot me a nice old DM on IG, and a very kind DM. And he just wanted to thank me for the nice words that I was saying about him and just for backing him. And that was awesome. That was a really cool feeling that he just came across my content and took the time out to message me that. And since then, we've messaged a little bit here and there, back and forth. And he's a fighter that I really am backing. Okay, this is a fighter that I really want to see good things come his way. First off, he's one of the most exciting fighters that we've seen come through Dana White's Contender Series. Is that fight against Mike Aswell was just spectacular. Yeah, it played out very closely. I did definitely have him edging that fight. He showed his warrior spirit. Okay, now this is a fighter in Bogdan who has KO power. Okay, he can sharpen up some things technically with his boxing, and specifically defensively, he could definitely sharpen some things up. He does eat damage, and we saw that cost him against Tom Nolan in his first fight on DWCS. But note, Tom Nolan will go out there and he will finish you up early. He does that time to time when he's facing you in a cage. So, besides that, though, what goes back to the drawing board, he did say that if he would have lost that Aswell fight, that he was probably going to hang the gloves up because he knew that that would have been his last opportunity to get a chance to fight in the octagon. Okay, so when you understand that split decision went his way, how pivotal that was for his future, I mean, it is crazy. What a Cinderella story there. Okay, but just note, he does have some issues defensively, and I've even talked to him about that, and he knows that. Okay, but he's a fighter that is a warrior, and even though he was knocked out against Tom Nolan, he definitely has an above-average chin. He could take a lot of damage. He took shots from Aswell, marched through, and he'll look to land his own damage on you. Now, not a lot of people know this, but he actually has a pretty polished up BJJ skill set as well. He's a solid grappler. He kicked off his martial arts training by traveling around Europe and trying to meet up with the best people that he could. And a lot of it was jiu-jitsu based and just all types of MMA based, but he has that base there. And so he's a well-rounded fighter. And let's cut to the chase here. I mean, Lucas Alexander, he's a fighter that's going to have a pretty big reach advantage here. He's taller. He kind of has the athleticism and those physical traits and shows small flashes at times. But Lucas Alexander is a consistent flake. He makes horrible decisions. He has bad fight IQ. We saw it cost him in that last fight against Jekka Sergi in a fight where he had a clear path to victory using his grappling, as we saw Jekka completely exposed and his fight prior against a low-level fighter. And you're telling me that Lucas couldn't put that to why he's taken so many scattered L's throughout the early portion of his pro career. Even in his first ever amateur bout, he took an L. Now, the Joe Anderson Brito fight subbed up so quickly. At least you put some respect on Brito's name. You know it's a high-level opponent, but taking losses early on to lower-level fighters. And one thing that you also have to notice, every time when he's losing fights, he's not just losing them, okay? He's making mistakes that cost him to be finished, okay? He gets finished. He gets subbed. He gets knocked out, all right? I mean, I could see Bogdan Grad doing something very similar to what Jekka did. It's just in a wild type of fight where they're scrambling and they're throwing at awkward angles. I could see Bogdan Grad cracking him with something wild. Okay, he throws spinning attacks and he'll bring it. He's going to throw the kitchen sink at Lucas Alexander, and I don't trust Lucas Alexander to hold up. I say my boy Bogdan Grad gets the KO, gets the finish here. Okay, I'll say that he gets a first or second round KO, similarly to what I just said about the other fight there. I think Bogdan Grad gets him out of there. Now, I will say this. Bogdan Grad opens up as a -200 on BetUS. That's a little steep for my liking. You're starting to see that line dip down. He's currently a -190 over on BetUS. You guys can head over to BetUS right now, lock that in at -190. But you guys know I always keep it real with you guys. And even though I'm a big Bogdan Grad fan, I definitely like him to win this fight. I'm very happy this is the opportunity that he's gotten for his UFC debut because it's a very winnable fight. He should win this fight. That line is a little steep for my liking, just based on the fact that Lucas Alexander, he makes these mistakes, but he does show some raw talent. And if he puts himself in a position to land a big shot on Bogdan, if Bogdan doesn't clear up and work on his head movement, it could cost Bogdan there. So I think the value's on the dog. That line's a little surprising. It's that high, but Bogdan Grad should be the favorite in this fight. And I think that he gets the job done. He should be like a -155, -160 favorite. And my boy gets the KO. And then we'll be chatting it up with Bogdan. We'll shoot him a message. I'll let you guys know what he says as he's and what he's doing to celebrate that first ever UFC victory. Shout out to my boy Bogdan. So as Mayra Bueno Silva got tired of taking L's up in the bantamweight division, she came to the conclusion that it was her time to drop down to the flyweight division. She gets an instant test against the number 12 ranked Jasmine Jasudavicius, who is a tough customer. She proved that on day one. You take a look back at that Dana White's Contender Series performance. She showed what she's about. Okay, this is a girl that pushes the pace and really uses her grappling to thrive in the cage. And what's interesting, I don't believe she has any real polished grappling background. Okay, she's a girl that just has that it factor there. Rest assured that when she got in any scraps back in high school or middle school, she was the girl that was ragdolling girls and handling business. Okay, she's a scrappy girl, and she likes to use that grappling. And now that's interesting here because Mayra Bueno Silva is a very polished BJJ player. Okay, she's a more proven submission threat. Okay, she has 6 submission victories out of her 10 wins. Well, Jasmine's not really pulling off subs, just 3 out of her 12. But she controls the fight with her grappling. She's the fighter on top. She's the fighter that breaks down her opponent with that pace and that pressure. Now, when it comes to the striking, I do believe that Jasmine has some holes there. Offensively, it's not the most technical and dangerous. Defensively, she has holes. She will be tagged up. We see it time and time and again. Even in fights where she's prevailed, she's taken that type of damage. 2 fights ago, she was able to pull that decision off against Fatima Klein, a young prospect in the game. Obviously, Fatima Klein was undersized in that fight, but Fatima Klein in the 3rd round was able to land some big shots on her. She wasn't able to do too much with it, but we saw that Jasmine is hittable. And even if Mayra can land a couple clean shots here and there, I still would favor the volume and the pressure from Jasmine. Okay, so that's where I'm going with my pick here. I'm going to pick Jasmine to win this fight by just making it ugly and just being more aggressive and just having more of that killer instinct. Okay, and another thing you just have to note is even though Jasmine at times, with the way that she forces her takedowns, could put her in a situation where she could be vulnerable to being caught in a sub, especially with a sniper submission artist like Bueno Silva. We've seen her pull off arm bars and all types of crafty subs when fighters come at her like that. Jasmine still has never been subbed. And even though we talked about the defensive flaws in the feet, she's also never been KO'd. Okay, so she pushes through. I will back her to push through here once again and for her to get her hand raised. Let's take a look at the live betting odds for this fight, and we are going to see that Jasmine is just over a 2-1 favorite here. Okay, currently she is right around a -225. Okay, over a 2-1 favorite. Do I see value on her at that line? I mean, I think the line's accurate. I'll put it to you like that. I really do think that she pushes through and gets the job done. With the women's fight like this in the flyweight division, and with some of Jasmine's fights playing out closely, and Mayra being a fighter that's established herself in the bantamweight division, she's coming down. She's a solid girl. I don't see value on that line. I think that the value's on the dog here, but at the end of the day, I still have to settle in with Jasmine pushing through and getting that hand raised, winning this fight via decision. What a fight this is, taking place in the lightweight division. We got Firas Zaim taking on Mike Davis. Neither of these fighters have a number next to their name as of right now, but I feel pretty confident that at least one of them will be ranked by the end of the year. Now, one of them is going to have a tough start to the year because most likely someone's going to take an L here unless we get a draw. All right. Firas Zaim is coming off his best ever victory. Okay, that knockout that he just had over Matt Frevola was absolutely epic. We had him targeted as a slight dog. I want to talk about that fight a little bit more so because I bumped into Matt Frevola at a recent UFC event, and we'll talk about that in a second. But Mike Davis, a fighter that we're very familiar with, we interviewed him back in the day on MMA Live Discussion. I sat there and chatted it up with him for almost an hour, which, at the time, I think I was pushing those interviews a little bit too long. I was kind of green on the mic, and I was torturing those guys, just sitting there talking to them for an hour. Probably should have kept it a little bit more compact. But I mean, I got to know him pretty well. I've seen him fight live multiple times as well. He's a stellar athlete. Okay, he has some real raw abilities. One thing that I gathered when I interviewed him is this isn't a guy that's really obsessed with the fight game. Okay, he's a real chill dude. And I remember I kept asking him in that interview, what did he want to accomplish in this sport, and what did he have on his radar? And he was just sitting there talking about how he's not really worried about that. He doesn't really care how quickly he gets back in there and how he eats cereal, which that blew my mind. He eats a lot of cereal. I mean, you take a look at his physique. I mean, this guy, you talk about crazy metabolism. He was joking about all these different cereals that he eats and how he could refine his diet more so, and he's already ripped. So I kind of wonder how serious he's taking the game these days and if he's sharpened up his diet and whatnot, because if he did, boy, forget about it. Okay, but he's a stellar fighter, right? And just real quick, you think back to the fight he had on Dana White's Contender Series, which he came up a little bit short against Sadiq Youssef, who's proven to be a phenomenal fighter, right? A fighter that's went on to be ranked and all that. But that was a fight where Davis went into it as the favorite. He was the fighter everyone had their eyes on already, even back then. He came up a little bit short. But besides that, just that one setback against Gilbert Burns where he was just outmatched. That was a big Gilbert Burns in his prime, and he got sub. Besides that, he constantly goes out there and handles business. He just does not stay active. While on the other hand, you got this dude, Firas Zaim, this kid who is just getting better and better. It's crazy the fact that he's just 27 years old. He's already been around for so long. I think he made his UFC debut when he was like 22. Okay, he had the kickboxing background before he came into MMA, and he's showcasing that he's getting better and better at stuffing takedowns. All right, there was that one little blemish as of recently where he was taken down and subbed by Terrance McKinney, got caught in that rear naked choke. But that fight took place about 3 years ago or so. And since then, he's now on a 4-fight winning streak. Went out there and just knocked out Matt Frevola, stuffed all Frevola's takedown attempts, which Frevola has that wrestling background. I bumped into Matt at that UFC event, and I interviewed Matt Frevola too back in the day. I sat there and chopped it up with him when he was in the patio. His mom was in the background. She said, "What's up to the show?" and all that. And Frevola's an awesome dude. I'll say that first and foremost. But I don't know if he didn't remember me or, taking things into consideration. I mean, he really, I don't know. I don't want to go there, but maybe he was just, he was brutally knocked out. Or also, he's kind of a famous dude and he probably gets that all the time, right? He's a big fighter. But, I say, "Hey, what's up, Matt Frevola? MMA fortune teller man interviewed you back in the day." And he kind of just gave me a look like he was trying to gather what was going on. It could have been multiple things. Maybe he caught some of my breakdowns. Maybe he didn't like the fact that I did have Faraz Ziam defeating him. Maybe he saw that I had Faraz Ziam as an official play and I posted it because he does follow me on IG. I don't know. Hopefully no bad blood there, man, because I really have a lot of respect for Frevola. Not bad blood, you know what I'm saying, though. Hopefully he doesn't look at me some kind of way, because at the end of the day, I got to pick these fights. It is what it is. I got to pick somebody, man, and this is what I do. So, and I'm about to pick a fight between these guys right here, and I'm going with Faraz Ziam. I think that he's going to be able to keep this fight standing at least long enough for him to score points on the feet. We've seen that he's live to knock out anybody. I mean, he has 6 KOs now, but as he's getting that grown man strength and that power edge, he's getting more KOs. All right, but he's very technical. He's very long, and he can hit you with knees, elbows, and all that. I could see him outpointing Mike here. Now, Mike Davis is going to bring in that brute strength. He's a physical monster, and Mike Davis is going to look to change levels and use some grappling. But I think that Ziam can stuff the takedowns for the most part, and I could see Ziam winning this fight if it goes to a decision. And we've never seen Davis knocked out. We've never seen Ziam knocked out. If we were to see a knockout, just the way that Ziam is handling himself in the cage, I think it's more likely we would see that. But I will favor Faraz Ziam to win a decision here. He's currently a plus 165 underdog, okay? He was a plus 205 not too long ago, okay? 2 days ago, he was a plus 205. So I'm just throwing dogs at you guys all day. We're going to have a post on IG with the teller, glaring out the window with the mullet blowing in the wind. As you guys know, I like to post once in a while, but we're throwing dogs at you. What's crazy is that Ziam opened up as a minus 260 initially on BetUS. I don't know what was up with that. That line's a little crazy because Davis is a beast. And, to play devil's advocate, if Davis is going to win this fight, he's just going to be a little bit more physically imposing. He's going to get some takedowns, and he's technical with the striking too. He's a good fighter. But it's Ziam that's going to be posting up against the cage, and he's showing real development there. Give me the value on the underdog. A bit of an odd matchup here as we have Terrance McKinney taking on Damir Hasnovic. And speaking of bumping into fighters in the arena, every single UFC event I go to, I see Terrance McKinney running around the bathroom ring, as you call it, or whatever you guys want to call it, which I tend to do as well. So it's kind of funny because we're hitting laps up against each other, and we always see each other. I think the next time I see him, I'm going to have to say what's up, ask for a picture. I'm not normally that type of guy. I only do that with specific types of fighters or people, but I keep seeing him and he seems like a cool dude. So I'm going to say what's up next time I see him. I mean, he's at every single fight and he looks to be having a good time when he's out there as well. I'll tell you what, he kind of has that look in his eye. Like, he's enjoying himself. He's a beast of a fighter. One of the most entertaining fighters in the fight game. Okay. We'll talk a little bit more about him in a second, but Damir Hasnovic is a fighter that's now 38 years old, hasn't been in the cage for about 2.5 years. Okay. And he's had some very unimpressive performances throughout the years. He struggles with his takedown defense and grappling. All right. Mark Diakese was able to kind of ragdoll him around. Before that, he had a victory over a lower level Yancy Medeiros. If you guys remember him, the Hawaiian Diaz brother. Before that, 2 losses in a row. Lost to my boy Christos Giagos. How about the Renato Moicano loss? That was a fight where he was subbed in 44 seconds, and then they were joking, kind of joking. I mean, he seemed pretty pissed, but he was saying, Renato was saying he wanted to fight more because he was going crazy. And then Hadžović said, well, you shouldn't have subbed me then, which was kind of a ludicrous statement, but it was kind of funny for us back in the day. And you take a look at any of his victories, they're all low level. Nick Hine, Marco Polo Reyes, Marcin Held, I guess that's probably his best one, who was a little bit of a one-dimensional fighter and was able to get that knockout in the 3rd round. The only time we've ever seen him knocked out, you need to take note of this, was against Mairbek Taisimov, who was a fighter that a lot of people had high hopes for. He dissipated from the game, but a nasty Tiger Muay Thai fighter. And that was the only time we've seen Damir knocked out. So you have to note that because Terrance McKinney goes out there to to finish you, okay? Either to knock you out or sub you. I don't know how easy he's going to find that knockout here because Damir's pretty durable, even though he's getting up in age. And the issue I have is if McKinney just runs out there and tries to bombard him with strikes and look for a knockout, he puts himself in a position to be countered, which we've seen happen very often with him. As of recently, it seems like it's happening more so than not. You take a look at his 5 fights. He was finished in 3 of his last 5 fights, and the 2 victories that he had were against low-level fighters and Mike Breeden and Brendan Marotte, okay? But I still do respect his game, okay? He also had that submission against Faraz Saim, who we were talking about, but Ziam was much more green back in the day. He knocked out Matt Favola as a dog in that fight. They clashed, they met. And when he meets and clashes with you, he can either knock you out or you can hurt him, okay? And he's coming into this fight off a brutal KO loss against Esteban Ribovics. He was knocked out in just 37 seconds, and you got to wonder where his head's at. Literally, like physically, where is his brain at? How rested is it? Because I wouldn't be shocked if he gets over eager in there, if even a fighter like Hadžović can counter him with something. Hadžović is decently technical with his striking, 5 KOs out of 14 victories, but it doesn't take much. You just got to catch him with the counter. I mean, you even think back to the performance that Terrance McKinney had back in the day. It's definitely worth noting against Sean Woodson, which he was a huge favorite on Dana White's Contender Series. Okay, he got caught with the KO. I think, he got caught with the flying knee by Sean Woodson. Okay, that just shows you how vulnerable he could be at times. He followed it up with the sub loss against Derek Minner. Okay, he consistently drops the ball. It's just that he has his rebound victories here and there, and he is just so entertaining, and I love watching him fight. And I like the fact that the UFC gave him this fight. I think it was a little bit of a potential layup for him to get back in the win column. That's how much the UFC respects him. He takes fights on short notice. He's always willing to step in there, and he's a beast. And I will say, if he takes the path of least resistance here, if he uses his wrestling, which he actually has a decorated wrestling background too, if he uses his wrestling, he can control this fight. And I think he could even find a sub. If he wants to go out here and try to get a bounce back knockout victory and show out for the fans, he's going to put himself in a vulnerable position. Don't be shocked if he gets countered with a KO in his own right there. So let's take a look at the odds where we will see Terrance McKinney is a minus 340 currently. He opened up as a minus 400. Now he is a minus 340 over on BetUS. And the reason why that line's coming down is because people understand, to chalk up 4-1 odds on him, and you're risking him you're risking the fact that he may go out there just looking to put on a show and he may get countered in one way or another. And that's the problem there. So I just don't trust him at that line. I think he gets the job done, but I do not trust him. The value is on Hadžović. I mean, realistically, there's probably value on almost any fighter that's a huge dog against him just based on the way he fights. In the heavyweight division, we have Shamil Gaziev taking on Thomas the Train Petersen. Both these fighters coming through Dana White's Contender Series. Both fighters coming in off a bounce-back victory, as Gaziev had a very important victory over Dontel Mays. He looked pretty damn good in that fight, and that was coming off that loss he had against Jairzinho Rozenstruik, where the cardio let him down a bit. But you have to note, that was a 5-round main event fight. Okay, he was finished in the 4th round, towards the end of the 4th round. Okay, and yes, we could have some concerns about his cardio, but this is a 3-round fight, and you have to love the way that he bounced back in that Dontel Mays fight. I mean, he's a huge man. He's well-rounded. His striking is diverse. He'll hit you at knees, elbows. He can punch you from the outside. He's huge. He has a 78.5 inch wingspan. And Thomas Petersen has shown to be a little bit more of a one-dimensional fighter, right? He has that JUCO wrestling, fights out of the southpaw stance, and I don't know. I need to see more from Thomas Petersen. Now, he had his own important bounce-back victory in his last fight where he defeated Muhammad Usman via unanimous decision. Before that, that was that disappointing Jamal Pogues fight. You like to see the development that he brought into that last fight, but I still have concerns about him. He suffers from lethargic syndrome. If you ask me, kind of reminds me of my old boy Jeremy Smith, which you guys will hear me reference once in a while. And what that basically means, it's just that brute type of style, a fighter that's a little bit slow and lethargic. He's stumbling down the street with his lugs, maybe put down a couple bottles of OE, and he may take on 2 or 3 small guys, and he might break a couple of ribs. Okay, but he does suffer a little bit with his speed. Okay, and that's what I see when I watch Petersen, man. He's a little bit lethargic, and the striking's not there. I think that we're going to see that Gaziev's striking is more refined, more developed. I do have question marks in regards to Gaziev's conditioning and how he takes care of himself at times, because we've seen him balloon up and carry a lot of excess weight. I think if he took the game a little bit more serious and refined his diet, he could really be a threat to this division. From what I've been seeing from him on Instagram, he seems to be leaning towards the better in shape version of himself. Okay, we've seen ups and downs, and he looks to be in decent shape. He spends a lot of time with big names like Muhammad Makayev, Magomed Ankalaev, and all those guys. I like who he surrounds himself with. And I think he is the more complete fighter. I think he's going to be a little bit of an issue for Petersen, because I don't think that Petersen's going to be able to have consistent success with his wrestling and his takedowns. And then this is going to be a fight that plays out on the feet for a long period of time. And I think that Gaziev is just a more polished striker. Okay, he has a massive reach advantage here, about almost a 5-inch reach advantage, and he's more technical and diverse. And I will lean towards the mammoth Gaziev's way. Now let's take a look at the betting line. Gaziev opened up as a -300 on BetUS. He is now currently a -390. Okay, you can run over to BetUS right now if you want to mix him in a parlay or something like that. Do I advise that? I mean, I don't think that's a horrible idea. I mean, just to show you the confidence I have in Gaziev here, I really do think that he shows up. But at the same time, Petersen's just 29 years old. There's a lot of room for growth, and he does have a solid base. He needs to come in a little bit lighter. I want to see how he looks on the scales. I think that he can clean his diet up as well. I think he carries excess weight. I want to see him step his speed up a little bit, and obviously show some growth with his striking. And I think you could argue there's some value on the dog there in a heavyweight fight like this. I mean, this is a tough one based on the line, but let me be clear. I think that Shamil Gaziev is the superior fighter right now, and I think that he goes out there and he gets the job done. Does he find a finish? Petersen has been knocked out once before. And let's just pull that up real quick. Okay, the knockout that he took was back against Waldo Cortez Acosta, a UFC caliber fighter, right? A fighter that's been in the UFC. He has good boxing skills. That was over in the LFA, and he got the knockout there with just 7 seconds left to go in the third round. I could see Gaziev maybe landing something that Petersen doesn't like, and he folds up, but I will lean towards a decision. Now, I will say that Gaziev wins this fight, and it goes over. I'm liking the over 1.5, over 2.5. I'm going to lean towards this fight, making it to the final bell. Hey guys, just a quick message. If anyone wants to work with me for my official plays, reach out to me through social media or email. I'll give you further information there. And then if you guys can, please smash that like button if you didn't already. Subscribe if you're new. Back to the video. We are officially up at the main card in the featherweight division. We have Muhammad Naimov taking on Kaan Ofli. Now, if I'm being honest, I'm not exactly sure why this is the fight to kick off the main card, but there is some time leading up to the fights. Maybe the UFC adjusts that. Naimov is coming off somewhat of a disappointing performance as he had a lot of steam going into that fight against Felipe Lima. And at the time, not everybody knew that Felipe Lima is the fighter that he is. Okay, and that includes myself. Okay, I understand there was some hype behind him. I understood some of the potential that he brought in to the cage. But, you know, leading up to that fight, you break down tape on Lima, and we've seen him taken down at times, and he seemed to be a little bit undersized for the division. I thought that Naimov would have been able to use his size and grappling to maybe stifle some rounds with his wrestling, and he did what he's done in the past that has been very alarming when you're watching Naimov, and that is that he kind of slowed down and gassed out. Okay, that's also what happened in that fight against Colin Anglin, which he was a big-time favorite against. That was back in 2020. On Dana White's Contender Series. He came up short there. Then he followed that up with a loss against Oliveira Murad, I believe the Haitian fighter there. I'm familiar with him from Titan FC. You guys know I'm frequent with the Titan FC scene. Okay, but after that loss, he really started to put it together, went on a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 fight winning streak leading up to that Lima fight, and he's knocking dudes out as well. Okay, he's showcasing that power. He also can wrestle, but the one hole in his game at times is his conditioning and his cardio, so that's something to keep an eye on there. But I mean, take note, the knockout that he had over Jamie Malarkey and Dylan Schultz, even the Eric Silva KO too, that one took just 44 seconds. I mean, he's dangerous, okay? He could put you out, all right? And we just saw Ofli get brutally KO'd in the Ultimate Fighter finale against Mayra and Santos, okay? Brutally KO'd. So, you know, this is another fight where you have a fighter coming into it, coming off a brutal KO. We got to see how he looks in there. I feel very confident out of all those fighters that we talked about that are going into their fights coming off those brutal KOs, at least one of them is going to follow it up with another brutal KO loss. Mark my words, out of all those fighters we talked about, one of them will be brutally KO'd again Is it going to be Ofli? I think potentially it could be. Ofli, a fighter, you know, he had success on The Ultimate Fighter, had a victory over Nathan Fletcher, who has a big fight coming up, coming from the English scene there. And had a submission victory after that. But I'm not overly impressed with Kaan Ofli. And, you know, he's Turkish, but fights out of Australia. I believe he's Turkish descent, but lives in Australia. And he's a fighter that's decently technical, but kind of has a slow pace to his style. And he's a little undersized here. And I think that this fight favors Naimov. He's hungry to bounce back with the victory. I'm sure he'll be very motivated going into this fight. He's just 30 years old. And I like the size and the skill set that he brings into this specific matchup here. And I will say that Naimov wins this fight. And I think that it's possible that he gets a KO. In fact, if I have to pick, I'm going to say that he does get that KO. Okay, so maybe it's Ofli that is the fighter that follows up his last KO loss with another one. Now, Naimov is a minus 290 favorite. He opened up as a minus 260 action coming on him. All right, he's right around a 3-1 favorite right now. I don't necessarily mind that line. It's a little high, but I do feel pretty confident in Naimov here. I don't think that he's going to go out there and gas out again. And even if he slows down in the third, I just don't know if Ofli is the fighter that's going to be able to get him out of there in that round. It's possible. Ofli has a decently well-rounded skill set, but it's really his submission game that is his bread and butter. Is he going to be able to break Naimov down and get on it back, maybe sink in a rear naked choke? It's possible. But I feel pretty confident in Naimov that he gets the job done. Okay, things are really going to start to heat up now moving forward to the end of the card. As far as name value and skill set goes, in the middleweight division, we have Ikram Aliskerov taking on André Muniz. Now, Muniz, once upon a time, was thought to be a threat to this division, specifically with the submission threat that he brings into his fights. 13 submissions out of his 24 victories. And you take a look at what he started to do dating back to that Dana White's Contender Series victory where he went out there and submitted Taylor Johnson. Taylor Johnson was the favorite, if I remember correctly, going into that fight. He was a wrestler who brought in some real athletic skills. He was early on in his career, and he was really the prospect in that fight. And Muniz shut that down, pulled off the first round submission via rear naked choke. He followed that up with an onslaught of victories inside of the octagon, defeating Antonio Arroyo, Bartosz Fabinski. He submitted him there. Then he submits Jacare Souza. That's when he really started to get that hype behind him. In retrospect, you look back and you understand that Jacare Souza was definitely at the tail end of his career, one of the most decorated grapplers we've ever seen in the sport. But remember, man, he was getting knocked out by fighters like Kevin Holland, even around that time. Okay, after that, he followed up with another submission over Eric Anders. Then he had the decision victory over Uriah Hall. And then it really started to fall off a cliff. He then gets submitted by Brendan Allen. Okay, gets submitted for the first time in his career. And then he gets TKO'd by Paul Craig. If you remember, Paul Craig was getting the better of the grappling exchanges and eventually pretty much flattened him out and TKO'd him there. Okay, so he followed that mess up with a victory over John Young Park. But now he's taking on Ikram Aliskerov, who we know is coming off another knockout loss. When he loses fights, he does get knocked out, right? We all remember the Khamzat Chimaev uppercut that he took, that he got knocked out there before he ever made it to the UFC. And then Robert Whittaker took him out in that big headliner. Okay, so he shows at times when things aren't going good for him in the cage to have issues getting knocked out. All right. And now I look at Aliskerov as still a very high level fighter that is very well rounded. All right. Out of his 15 victories, he spreads them out very evenly as he has 6 knockouts and he has 5 subs. And he really just shows to know what he's doing anywhere the fight goes. And that's going to be an issue for Muniz because I don't think that Muniz is going to be able to exploit him with his jiu-jitsu game. In fact, if they go down to the mat, I think it's going to be Aliskerov that's on top of him, most likely setting up a ground and pound finish. I don't want to completely overlook the danger that Muniz can potentially threaten with. He is dangerous and he knows what he's doing. He is a high-level BJJ player, but Aliskerov should be able to shut that down, and I don't think that Muniz is going to like the damage that he's being hit with. And I could see potentially this fight playing out similarly to the Paul Craig fight. I could really see something similar playing out there, and I don't feel that Muniz is a threat on the feet, which is one of the better ways that you're going to be able to go in there and take a fighter like Aliskerov out. All right, you take a look at the numbers real quick. Not that this is completely indicative to the fight, but when Aliskerov is in his fights, there's a really high pace to it. He's landing 7 8.03 strikes per minute while also absorbing 7.27. On the other hand, Muniz has a very different type of fight where he's only landing 1.97 and only absorbing 1.99. So a real contrast in fighting styles as far as the numbers go. But I think that this is a fight where we could potentially see the pace picked up a little bit, especially with Aliskerov coming in hungry to deliver. And I think that Aliskerov is just going to be too technical, too well-rounded for Muniz, and eventually he's going to set up a finish down on the mat, or potentially even standing too. That's not out of the realm. But I do see this fight, like I said, playing out like the Craig fight. I think Aliskerov can put himself in a very dominant position down on the mat, and he could start to unload, and we'll see how Muniz deals with that type of damage. Now, Aliskerov is one of the biggest favorites on the card. In fact, he is the biggest favorite on the card at right now on BetUS at minus 625. So there he is. Ring the bells. The biggest favorite of the night. Now, is there any value on that type of line? Is there even any value where he opened up on BetUS at minus 450? Yeah, I would say back then there was some value at minus 625. I just don't see it. I just don't see it being worth it. Like I said, Muniz is still a fighter that could potentially lock up a sub in some type of way. And let's just say that he lands a strike with his awkward long striking that he's been working on, but it's really not there. Let's just say somehow in the firefight he clips Aliskerov, who's coming into this fight off that devastating Whitaker knockout. Another fighter coming into this card off a brutal KO. Let's just say the brain's not healed up and somehow he gets clipped. I mean, it's just not worth the minus 625 line, in my opinion. I would have to say the value's on Muniz, even though I see Aliskerov shutting him down and getting that TKO finish in the second or third round, a little bit in the later half of the fight. Now, this has to be one of the most exciting fights of the card. We have Said Nurmagomedov taking on Vinicius de Oliveira, Loke Dog. This dude is a character, and he has burst on the scene rapidly. When you take into consideration, he's just 2-0 in the UFC, and he's getting a main event spot against Said here. And even just take a look at the last fight that the UFC gave him there, man. They matched him up against Ricky Simon, an established fighter in the octagon, and he was only 1-0 going into that fight. So kind of shows you what the UFC thinks of him. They think that he's a fighter that is ready for these types of opportunities. He has an overwhelming amount of pro experience for his age, right? I mean, he already has 24 pro fights. He hasn't even cracked the 30 marker yet. But more importantly, I think that the UFC looks at him as a fighter that can really deliver for the fans and kind of be a spectacle type of a fighter. Okay, he's very bombastic. You take a look at his highlight reel outside the UFC. I mean, he's mocking fighters after he knocks them out. And, for us as fans, sometimes you like that stuff, especially if you already like the fighter. You kind of are backing him when he's making a scene in the cage. But if you don't really like the fighter, when they do that type of stuff, it could gravitate some hatred and for some of us really not to like him, and for some of us to want to see him get knocked out. Okay. And if you're in that seat, you may get opportunities to see that happen, because you take a look at all of his losses, all three of his losses, they all come by way of KO. And we'll work our way down, and then we'll go back up a little bit more to some of the success he's been having. But you take a look, dating back to 2018, okay, he was knocked out by Christian Quinoez, a UFC fighter. He got knocked out by Adriano Ramos in the first round in just 1 minute and 36 seconds. He got knocked out by Ali Taleb in the third round. And it's the type of fighting style that he has. He's very aggressive. He'll look to knock you out in all kinds of ways, as we saw in that Bernardo Sopai fight, which Sopai is a high-level fighter. He just bounced back with his first ever UFC victory, an extensive training partner of Khamzat Chimaev. But that was a fight where De Oliveira kind of took it over late, and he hit him with that flying knee. And, I mean, he's a wild dude. Kind of has a street fighting style, if you guys know what I'm talking about. He's not extremely technical. His punches come from very far out east and west, so he's looking to land these wild hooks on you. There's a lot of power in them. We saw him get a knockout on Dana White's Contender Series as well before getting the contract with the UFC. And he's a dangerous fighter for anybody. But I'll tell you what, Nurmagomedov is a fighter that is much more refined, in my opinion. Okay, he is a very complete fighter. He's very dangerous with his submission threat. And I actually believe that he's a real threat with his striking as well, even though the numbers don't necessarily point towards that being true. He doesn't have an overwhelming amount of knockouts, but since he's joined the UFC, he's had a couple, right? You think back to when he signed with the UFC, Defeats Justin Scoggins. That was back in the flyweight division. Eventually, he did bump up in weight. Gets a spinning back kick KO on Ricardo Ramos, right? Ricardo Ramos, one of the kings of spin, hits him with some of his own stuff there, gives him a taste of his own medicine. Had that real quick knockout over Mark Stragel. And, okay, when he's not getting knockouts, he's in there a lot of times getting quick submissions, right? He gets nasty subs. He'll slap on guillotines on you and all types of wild stuff. We've seen him do that a couple times, right? Pulled off the guillotine choke on Cody Stamann. He was looking like the teller in there, the way that he pulled that off so quickly in 47 seconds. And then he also comes into this fight off another very quick guillotine choke. I mean, that's his move. He has these long limbs, and he'll really crank that on you. Now, it's worth noting that besides the Raoni Barcelos loss, which was, look at Barcelos. You saw him rewinding the clock recently, shutting down that Talbot hype. But Barcelos, especially back then, was a very high-level fighter, and he was a more complete fighter. Barcelos used some grappling and was able to defeat him there. But the Jonathan Martinez fight, we all had Nurmagomedov winning that fight. You take a look at the majority of the media scoring. They agree with me. I had that fight 29-28 for Nurmagomedov. There was only four medias that scored the fight for Martinez. I don't know what they were watching because I just rewatched a lot of that fight, and it was clearly Nurmagomedov winning 2 of the 3 rounds there. And look at the judges that scored it for Martinez: Michael Bell and Adelaide Bird. Oh, man. Now, Nurmagomedov is primed for this matchup at 32 years old. I think that it is possible he could hit De Oliveira with a KO shot if De Oliveira gets too wild in there. Of course, De Oliveira can land his own KO in this fight. I mean, he's great at pulling that off. So he's going to look to land something like that. I would not be shocked if it did happen. But overall, I mean, Nurmagomedov is a fighter that's never been KO'd. He has a nice high guard. He's technical. I think he can avoid that type of situation and just be the better fighter. This is a 3-round fight. If Nurmagomedov ever gets to that situation where he's in a 5-rounder, we could talk a little bit about his cardio. He's been working on that, but there's been some performances that have been a little shaky there. And on the other hand, Vinicius looks to pick things up as the fight goes. Nurmagomedov has to be careful as how he looks in the 3rd round. Keep an eye on that. But overall, I just think that Nurmagomedov is too technically sound, and he's the more well-rounded fighter, and I like him to get the job done here. And it could go anyway. He may be able to pull off a sub, a knockout, or he can win a decision. It could go really one of any 3 of those ways, so it's kind of hard for me to sit here and give you a method of victory. It's really that type of fight because he's just so well-rounded. He pulls things off in all kinds of ways. And we talked about those nasty guillotine chokes, but Vinicius, when he's losing, he is losing by getting knocked out. So maybe that's the way we'll go. We'll say Nurmagomedov hits him with something wild and watch the kicking game of Nurmagomedov because he's nasty with his kicks. And I will take him to win the fight. Let's take a look at the betting odds. He opened up as a -186, and it's a little bit of up and down action, but really it's kind of settling in where it opened up. Right around, it's a -180 on Syed, and I don't mind that line. I lean towards his -180 line. I think there's more value even on him at a -180 than Lokdog. And realistically, I'm hoping that Nurmagomedov shuts him down and finishes him. And I hope he even gives him a little something. Maybe there's some bad energy going into this fight. We'll see how the weigh-ins look and all that because Lokdog brings in that type of energy. Maybe Nurmagomedov doesn't like it. And we see him kind of give him the old DX suck it as he knocks him out. I would love to see that. We got the big kahuna, the number 4th ranked heavyweight Sergey Pavlovich taking on the number 9th ranked Jairzinho Rozenstruik. All right, these fighters are absolute knockout artists, right? You take a look at the numbers. Pavlovich winning 83% of his fights by way of KO. Rozenstruik winning 85% of his fights via KO. And also, if you take a look at their losses, Rozenstruik has been knocked out in 40% of them. Pavlovich has been knocked out in 67% of his losses. Essentially, 2 of his 3 losses, he was finished there. You have to believe that Pavlovich is coming into this fight extremely motivated with the fact that he lost his last 2 fights. And when you're taking a look at his last 2 fights, please understand they're 2 losses against extremely high-level fighters. Alexander Volkov, this is a fighter that's just being slept on. He got absolutely robbed in his last fight against Cyril Gane. I mean, he just went out there and defeated Cyril Gane, who is towards the top of the mountain in this division. Before that, he did take an L against Tom Aspinall. Tom Aspinall, in my opinion, is the baddest man on the planet, if you will. We're all waiting to see him versus John Jones. We'll see how that fight plays out. But Pavlovich coming in off 2 L's, but that does not describe who he is as a fighter. So while Pavlovich is taking these L's, Rozenstruik is going in there and getting his hand raised. He's on a 2-fight winning streak. Actually, he's won 3 of his last 4 fights, and he's had some impressive victories. How about the fact that he's coming off a split decision victory over Tai Tuivasa, one of the most disgusting decisions I've ever seen. He absolutely dominated that fight. It was clearly 30-27. If you guys remember, Howie Booth scored that fight 30-27 for Tai Tuivasa. Absolute blasphemy, okay? And on the other hand, you had Charlie Keach and David Leatherby scoring the fight for Rozenstruik, but it was really Leatherby that was the only judge that scored it properly, 30-27. You take a look at all the media scoring here. Every single media outlet scored this fight 30-27, but meanwhile, these judges can't even figure it out. Somehow this dude, Charlie Keach, gave the first round to Tuivasa, which was ridiculous as well. You take a look at the numbers. Rozenstruik outstruck him 92-37 on total strikes. 91 significant strikes to 37 significant strikes. The fight took place on the feet for the entirety, and it's just, I can't believe. I remember hearing the decision there, and it's bringing me back, and I just still can't believe it. But anyways, before that, he gets the 4th round victory over Shamil Gaziev, which we talked about earlier. That was a big performance. That was a main event fight where Rozenstruik showed that he's just continuously a threat in this division to anybody. He has nasty power. If you guys remember how he kicked off the beginning part of his UFC career, I mean, you're talking about some of the best highlight KOs that this division's ever seen. He has high-level striking. At times, when he's lost fights in the past, he has suffered with his output. You take a look at the numbers here, landing 3.75 strikes per minute compared to Pavlovich's 5.86. I do expect Pavlovich to be the more aggressive fighter, even though as of recently, Rozenstruik has fixed that a bit. So you also need to take note of that. He has changed over the years. It was really the early portion of his UFC career where that was really a problem. Even that, with that being said, I still expect Pavlovich to be more of the aggressor. Pavlovich absorbs 5.03 compared to Rozenstruik's 2.74. You see that on tape. Pavlovich can be a little bit more vulnerable to being hit with a shot, and it's not out of the realm that Rozenstruik can knock him out, because Rozenstruik can knock anybody out on the right night. So understand that. Now, how do I see this fight playing out? I love the reach advantage that Pavlovich brings in here. He's going to have about a 6-inch reach advantage. It's not going to be like his last fight against Volkov, where he's very frustrated and he can't get in range to land those powerful shots. This fight's going to be different. He's going to have opportunities to land here. This is a fight where we can see him once again get that big knockout. In fact, it's probably where I'm going to go with my pick here. But don't forget what Pavlovich is about. Okay, I've been there live. I was cage side for his fight against Tai Tuivasa, and it was brutal, the beatdown that he put on Tai. I mean, when you were just hearing the power in the cage, it was crazy, because when he was knocking Tai out on the night, it was very quiet when it was happening because everybody was rooting for Tuivasa. And then as Pavlovich was unloading on him, the whole arena quieted down. It was crazy, and you just heard the thuds and just the damage he was inflicting. He's just 32 years old. And another major factor in this fight is the fact that Pavlovich has very underrated wrestling. Okay, I know he's put in a lot of work over the years with Steve Mako over at American Top Team in Coconut Creek. And Rozenstruik at times has struggled with grapplers. We saw that recently against Jailton Almeida, but we've also seen him struggle in the past with being taken down and kind of looking like a turtle on his back. So if Pavlovich goes that route, he can have success, but I think that he'll also get the better of the striking. But when they're striking, Rozenstruik is still extremely dangerous as well. All right, so, but I would say Rozenstruik needs to land a KO. I shouldn't say that. Shouldn't say that he needs to land a KO, but for him to have success, he may be a little bit more reliant on landing that KO. I'm not sure if he outstrikes Pavlovich, especially with the fire Pavlovich is coming into this fight with. I think he'll have the volume edge. All right, let's take a look at the betting line. Pavlovich opened up as a -210 favorite on BetUS. We got big action coming in on him. He's now a -270. Wouldn't be surprised if that line continues to trend that way and he settles in around a -320 on fight night. Wouldn't be surprised. We'll keep an eye on that. But right now, you can get him at a -270 line on BetUS. And is there value on that line? That's a little tough to say, man. That's a high line for a heavyweight bout like this, where we may see a knockout come either way. I really like Pavlovich, and I really have a gut feeling that he's going to deliver and get the W here. Minus 270, though. Obviously, I don't seem too eager about that. The number 15th ranked welterweight MVP, Michael Venom Page, chooses to jump up in weight to the middleweight division and take on Nurmagomedov. Now, I'm wondering if he's going to really settle into this weight class. I mean, I'm assuming so. He's 37 years old. He has a very long frame, so he could probably fill in here and just do fine in the middleweight division. Or I am wondering, is this more of an opportunity for him to be in a showcase fight, striker versus striker? This is just a huge matchup from an entertainment standpoint. So time will tell if it's just the opportunity or if he's really going to settle in here. But MVP, since joining the UFC, it still blows my mind how so many people overlooked him against Kevin Holland. I could not believe that Kevin Holland was the favorite going into that fight, especially now when you look at Kevin Holland. And, Kevin Holland, he lost 4 of his last 5. If he loses his next fight, he'll have lost 5 of his last 6. Listen, I'll just say this real quick. Remember, me and Holland had our little beef, and you guys know I joke about it. If you guys saw Kevin Holland on the Jackson podcast, that really showed you the type of dude he is. And I tried to warn you guys. I mean, just rude, disrespectful to Rampage. Rampage is a fun dude that has a real good sense of humor. And you saw Kevin Holland's not who you guys all thought that he was. Just because he talks in his fights, everyone thought that he was like this quirky, funny guy. It's not the case. I got so many messages from people talking about how nasty he was when they met him and tried to get like an autograph or a picture with him. And, I tried to warn you guys. Anyways, go run that tape over in the Jackson podcast and watch the energy he had to Rampage. I don't know why Rampage didn't slam his head through the table, but, Kevin Holland was very happy to see him lose. You guys saw the video that I put off on IG. We cashed there, but we also posted a free official play video on MVP when he went in there at dog odds and defeated Kevin Holland. And then, in his next fight, he takes on Ian Machado Gary, which was an official play of mine. I did say Gary, and when we cashed there, I'm high on Gary. That fight played out a lot more competitively than I even thought it was going to be. That fight came down to the wire, and Gary had to use those grappling skills that he has that a lot of people don't realize that he has in the third round to snag that victory. But listen, this is a completely different type of matchup, okay? Nurmagomedov is nothing like Gary in that sense. He would never be able to take a back. He would never be able to do anything like that in the grappling realm. This is going to be a straight up kickboxing match. And I have a little bit of an issue backing Nurmagomedov here because although Nurmagomedov, who just landed one of the most phenomenal KOs that we've ever seen with that double spinning back fist over Oman Petrosyan, put some money in our pockets too. It felt good. But although he landed that crazy KO and he's had some big knockouts throughout his career, I still see him get touched up in his fights. Okay, let's be honest, because I've been backing him. I've had money on him in certain situations, and I'm watching the fight, and I'm like, oh, I'm on the edge of my seat. Okay, sometimes his hands are low, and he's relying on his footwork, and he gets touched up a bit, and that could be a problem when you're in there with a snake of a fighter, an MVP that is just really fast. I mean, he's like a viper in there. Of course, I mean, that's kind of the whole stick anyway, but I mean, he really is the striking speed on him, and he's like a viper, and I could easily see MVP landing a knockout in this fight. Now, I could see Nurmagomedov landing his own knockout. We've seen MVP knocked out before. If you remember when Douglas Lima put him out there in Bellator, we've seen him knocked out once before, just one time. But besides that, when he's losing fights, like when he lost to Logan Storley, it's typically against fighters that are trying to push the pace with the grappling and looking to push him up against the cage and take him down. And that's not going to be happening in this fight. So I really think that this puts MVP in a great position. And I think that MVP, he's getting up there in age, but if he's going to show us what he's still been showing us as of recently, because he was up in age in his last couple fights in the UFC, and he's still looking to be moving very well in there. He's very quick. I think he's the better striker. I do. I think it's more likely he lands the big strikes in this fight, and I think it's more likely he can land a knockout, and maybe he pulls that pokeball out of his back pocket, tosses it over there. I mean, I highly doubt he'll be doing that over there in Saudi Arabia, but I'm backing MVP here, and I think that I have no problem picking another knockout here. Another knockout pick for me. I'm saying MVP lands something wild here. There's going to be a very high pace to this fight, and Nurmagomedov is there to be hit. So I'm liking the unders in this fight, or as far as on the unders, I mean, I like this fight to not make it to the final bell. Put that there. All right, don't get me started on the unders, man. I had an under 2.5 on the Jamal Hill versus Yuri Prohaska fight. And you guys know Prohaska gets the KO about like 28 seconds after that marker there. That was brutal the other night, but when we should have hit. But this is a fight where I do believe we're going to see a KO again. I just don't think it makes it to the final bell. I don't know about under 1.5, but they're going to be striking it out. And I say MVP lands the KO. And even if it goes to the judges' scorecards, he's just going to be landing much cleaner. MVP opened up as a plus 145. He did come down to a plus 125. He's back up at a plus 145. And the highest we've seen him touch was a plus 160. I mean, he's the clear underdog here. This is another underdog pick from the teller coming your guys' way. I like MVP here. This fight should be capped much closer. Okay, this fight should be capped at the very least at even odds. So I think that Nurmagomedov stock is just a little bit, he's coming in a little inflated based on the fact that he just landed that double spinning back fist KO and he's fighting over in his neck of the woods and whatnot. But it doesn't matter if you're fighting in your neck of the woods when you get hit with something nasty and you're put out. Here we go. We got the main event, style bender. Israel Adesanya, the number 2 ranked middleweight fighter, is taking on Nassourdine Imavov, who's ranked number 5. Imavov has really been putting in some work, and it's crazy to think he's just 28 years old. That is really something to note there. Okay, he's not even really near the 30 marker, man. He's got 2 solid years before he hits 30. Imagine what Imavov is going to be doing in the octagon when he's 32, 33. If he continues to develop the way he's been developing, which has been very nice, his game has really been rounding out. The confidence is behind him these days. His last loss was that Sean Strickland loss. What a learning experience that was for him. He was like 26 years old at the time. Okay, Sean Strickland, a great fighter. Maybe Strickland a little overrated these days. I don't know. Maybe overrated as far as entertaining as he is in the cage. He's a phenomenal fighter. Very excited for that DDP fight. Cannot wait to give you my thoughts on that. Maybe I'm flipping it up this time. I'm more of a DDP nowadays than a Strickland guy. When going into the first fight, I was more of a Strickland guy. You guys know DDP has grown on me. I think he's more of the alpha male, but I'll save that conversation for another day because I got a lot to say. Wait till we get to that episode. Okay, but besides that loss, and then you got to go back to the Phil Hawes loss. That was a fight that he had in the bag, and he had issues with his cardio back then. He gassed out. Hawes was holding him against the cage, and he almost got him out of there in the third still, but eventually he lost 2 or 3 rounds, and Hawes was just, he's a strong wrestler and he was holding him a lot and whatnot, but you saw the development after that. He was going out there, he knocking dudes out left and right, knocked out Ian Heinisch, Edmund Shabazian, had a victory over Joaquin Buckley. All right. He had a victory over Chris Curtis. Make no mistake, that was a victory. The fight was a no contest. If I remember correctly, it was the headbutt. I think it was the headbutt on the eye. And then Curtis tried to play it like he didn't know what he was doing, but he said he couldn't see or something like that. Anyways, he was getting worked, and that was an official play. Man, I was very frustrated because we didn't cash that. All right, after that, defeats Roman Dolidze, Jared Cannonier, Brendan Allen, and he's just looking better and better in all of these fights. While on the other hand, Israel Adesanya has had some questionable performances. He's getting up there in age. All right, he's taken some time off throughout the years. I mean, the Sean Strickland fight, that was such a weird fight for him. He got tagged in that first round. He didn't like it. He was so hesitant. I will give him credit because in the next fight against DDP, he did bring the energy. That was a phenomenal fight. And I mean, he definitely was scoring and looking good early on in that fight. And then eventually DDP breaks him down and gets the finish. You guys want to watch something crazy, go pull up the fight companion I did. I was live. I streamed that one live, which I promise you guys I will be doing a lot moving forward. I'm working on some things here. But and I was going crazy. We broke stuff. We were jumping around. I cashed a huge bet. That was another free official play. Go run through my videos. I gave that to you guys for free, and I'll be doing some of that moving forward here. But high level losses: DDP, Sean Strickland, Alex Pereira. So when you say Adesanya lost 3 of his last 4, that doesn't really fully describe who he is. He is a phenomenal fighter. You cannot overlook a fighter like Adesanya. But I'll tell you what, I really like the momentum that Imavov is bringing into this fight. And I actually think that Imavov is the more well-rounded fighter. I like the youth that he has, and just I think he has more mileage on his vehicle. And you guys know where I'm going with this. I'm about to throw another dog your guys' way. Okay, another dog. I got dogs in the co-main event and the main event. If you were to be betting those, I'm not saying those are official plays, but we just got to hit one of those 2, and you're in the green there. But I think both of them win it. Imavov's striking is extremely high level. Extremely high level. Okay, so he could hang with Adesanya there all day. I mean, this is a matchup between 2 high-level strikers. I'm very excited to see how that plays out. You take a look at the numbers, almost identical as far as what they're landing and absorbing. It's kind of interesting how close the numbers are here. The significant strike percentage, their defensive ratio. I mean, these fighters are very similar fighters in that manner, a little bit of different styles, but I actually think that Imavov can get the better of the striking. And I think if we see a knockout, it's more likely that Imavov will knock out Adesanya. We've seen Adesanya take damage throughout the years, and even in some fights he didn't get knocked out, he was hurt. And we've never seen Imavov KO'd thus far. And so they've both been subbed once. We're not going to see a submission here, I don't think. Maybe Imavov tries to hunt for a sub. I don't see that. That's not out of the realm if things got ugly and Imavov hopped on the back, because his grappling skills are developing. But I see this being a striking affair, maybe a little bit of some mix-up. At the end of the day, I like the dog here. You head over to BetUS right now. Imavov is a plus 140. Okay, it's another dog the teller's throwing your guys' way. So make sure you're following me on IG at MMA Fortune Teller. No more underscore, boys. And you will definitely see a little graphic of me with that dog, the bounty hunter mullet blowing in the wind. We got to post that up there. Well, we'll make a new one. And that's another dog selection, boys. Give me Imavov to win this fight via decision. I'm going to say it goes to decision. Wouldn't be shocked if there was a late finish, though. All right, boys, another one in the books. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me throughout this entire video. You know, without you guys, we'd have nothing going on here. So you guys mean everything. Please smash that like button before you guys leave. Hit the subscribe if you're new here to the channel. Got to hit you guys up with some parting words. You know, we do this on the fly. I'll tell you what, man, I've been very excited about what I'm working on here behind the scenes. I know I've been promising you guys a lot of stuff, and just kind of give you a little like sneak peek, some things I'm looking at. I've been getting involved with the chat GPT stuff, and I think that that's going to correlate to some good content in just a variety of ways. I'm excited about some of the stuff I've been learning about with AI and all that. So if anybody is very well versed with that stuff, if you ever want to throw some tips towards the teller's way, shoot me an email or DM me on social media. I would love to get some input from you guys that really know about that stuff. But it's been fun. It's been fun. And there's a couple other things that have been going on behind the scenes, and maybe getting some offers to do some media press for like the GFL and stuff like that, like different things like that. And it's been very exciting because I know where this is going, boys. I know where this is going. I told you guys we're going to take this to the highest of levels. And before you know it, the teller will be working UFC events, and I'll be traveling and doing all that type of stuff. So, I mean, that's the end goal. But it all starts with a little support from you guys. And I hope you guys are accomplishing your goals out there. All right, I got the blue verification now on IG. I should have had that a long time ago, but throw that out there too. But you know, without you guys, I'd be nothing. So make sure you guys are also accomplishing your goals. I support all you guys to do that as well. Get on your grind, go do that, and just that's what I want to leave you guys with real quick. Make sure that you guys are on the right path to what makes you happy, but what also is good too. You got to make sure you're on a solid path, the right path. You know, you don't want to be on an evil path or anything like that. Make sure you're on the good path to making yourself happy, but also being decent to your people around you. And don't let people knock you down, and don't let people try to steer you and hate on you. Don't let them steer you away from what you're doing, because you're going to get a lot of people that do that. I notice it all the time. When you have progress going and coming towards your way, people try to step in front of it. It's very strange. Even people that you think are there for you or that love you, even those kinds of people get this weird thing. Okay, it happens. So, but then of course, you have other people that are there that really support you too. So just make sure you understand that, see all that, and don't let those barriers get in your way to what the end goal is. Make sure you know what that end goal is and know what you need to do to get there. All right, guys, signing out. Teller.
The teller.